Like, I remember the Clone Wars movie, and I remember all you guys who hated it. And now everybody loves Ahsoka.
She wants Jedi to be able to have romantic relationships. She wants Jedi.
I hope not. I hope you're wrong.
She does. She does. The Jedi view balance as no dark side. There's only light. I think anybody would look at that and they go, that's not balance, that's domination. And when I say anybody, I mean...
Hey guys, welcome back to Geeky Stoics. This is the Geeky Stoics podcast, and today we're talking about the differences in storytelling and maybe the controversial differences in storytelling between the Disney Star Wars era and, the George Lucas Star Wars era. Because if there's nothing else that we should do here, it's some good old-fashioned Star Wars YouTube clickbait. And so without further ado, let me throw it over to this guy. How's that for a promise?
Are you calling me a farmer of clickbait, Riley Blanton?
You just be like, Disney Star Wars sucks, and then you'll be like, and you'll have had exactly zero original thoughts so far.
Yeah, and there's the end of Geeky Stoics, going straight for the gutter.
Yep. No more invites to Lucasfilm. No, I'm kidding. It was never. But here's the thing, though, and that's why I led at the top of the show. Is we actually are going to discuss, I think, some of the philosophical approaches to storytelling in Star Wars. But here's what I'm going to make the boring promise. The boring promise is we're actually going to talk about it with some nuance. We're going to talk about like some of the philosophical, deeper elements when it comes to how you approach storytelling in Star Wars. Now, if you're watching this podcast for the first time, you're like, who the hell are these yahoos? One, that's a fair question. Two, hey, I'm Riley. I did the Star Wars Report podcast for about 11, just short of 11 years, and talked about Star Wars a lot during that time. And this was during the time, I would say, the transition from as the prequels were fading and the Clone Wars was beginning. That's right when Star Wars Report was a thing. So I was there in the trenches in the early days of podcasts, right before you could actually you would download them to your iPod. And that's the era that I kind of came of age as a Star Wars fan, plugged into the internet side of Star Wars fandom. So specifically the era of Clone Wars. I remember the Clone Wars movie, and I remember all you guys who hated it and didn't mind saying so at all. And now everybody loves Ahsoka. Okay, now I'm getting distracted from the main point. But Steven, back to you. I did want to bring this forward because that's kind of my bona fides. You're the political nerd Star Wars podcast. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But it's true. Beltway Banthas is your bona fides. You spent many years delving into the likes of Star Wars philosophy and politics with some of the strongest political figures on the left and right. So I think that's the background I feel like that we need to give as we talk about the Leslye Headland controversy. Over to you, Stephen Kent. Oh no, I lost you for a second. I may have there he is. There we go.
Oh, so I was just sitting here glaring at you in silence. Yeah, no, I don't know where to begin with this because we're headed into having a new Star Wars show. It's called The Acolyte. It takes place about 100 years before the Phantom Menace, and Leslye Headland has been doing a bunch of interviews as the showrunner for the series, leading up to it and being asked about all sorts of things about Star Wars and the Force and how it works and all this kind of stuff. And there is a certain genre of entertainment, particularly right-wing reactionary entertainment commentary that basically is just devoted to hating everything. You can't talk about new Star Wars things unless you're couching it in it being some sort of Marxist feminist war on men. And it's very exhausting and it's silly. It's not what I like to do. However, sometimes these individuals who are running Star Wars these days, with the exception of Dave Filoni, he's just perfect. They just sort of give you real reason for concern. And Leslye Headland gave an interview to a magazine that I can't remember the name of, and it was reported on its Screen Rant. And Screen Rant did the write-up of her comments on what balance in the Force means and how her series, The Acolyte, is going to engage with this idea of why the Force needs to be balanced, which is one of those main ideas behind Star Wars. We must achieve balance in the Force. There's a chosen one prophecy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Leslye Headland's view of balance of the Force, Riley, doesn't comport with how George Lucas, he's not God, but the maker of Star Wars, thought about balancing the Force at all, and it concerns me greatly.
Well, I think this is, and this is where I was laughing at the beginning of this podcast, because our approach to this conversation will make us no friends and all enemies, because it's like we aren't taking any side here. But I do think it's really interesting to think about the concept of balance in the Force, because it's so much at the core of Star Wars. And as I mentioned at the beginning, as a kid of the prequel era, like that was the foundation of my Star Wars fandom, I really thought of balance of the Force. That wasn't even really a thing as much in the original trilogy. I'm trying to even remember if the phrase balance of the Force is even really a concept in the original trilogy.
It wasn't really. I'm trying to think, like, the only time where it might have maybe even been mentioned, the word balance would have been on Dagobah and Luke's training under Yoda, but he really just warned him about the quick and the easy path. Like, it was an absolutist take against the dark side. There was no talk about a balance between the Force, but it becomes a main principle of the prequel trilogy that Anakin Skywalker was a chosen one to bring balance. And here's the joke. The Jedi, to them, balance between the Force is not a scale 50-50 with light and dark on each side. And we're trying to make sure the galaxy doesn't spin out of control. We want to keep just enough dark in balance with the light, et cetera, et cetera. And the joke really goes that, like, the Jedi view balance as no dark side. There's only light. There is only light side, and therefore a Jedi order will reign supreme. The Sith will be destroyed, and we will have balance. And I think anybody would look at that and they go, that's not balance, that's domination. And when I say anybody, I mean me. I wrote this book called How the Force Can Fix the World.
That's beautiful. I have a copy, like right there. Look at that. Look at that right here on my screen too. There we go.
In which I argue in the course of this book, and this is where I'm being humble here, so I'm not going after Leslye Headland to be mean. I argue in my balance chapter, which is blurred out by my artful camera techniques, that Star Wars is a message of balance and incorporating certain amounts of the dark side into the world. You can't completely destroy darkness. Therefore, you wouldn't have light. If you don't have dark, you don't have light. You have to have something to compare light to. This is a view that I have long held, and it's a view that I have understood as being kind of what Star Wars is about: yin and yang, dualism.
Powerful dark, powerful light. Look there, I brought a sequel trilogy quote in. Look at me go.
Luke Skywalker says it, and Luke Skywalker embodies this dualistic philosophy in The Last Jedi. He even has a Jedi Tao, yin yang sculpture on the ground in his temple on Ahch-To. However, yin yang dualism is actually sort of a new thing in Star Wars and its overall moral canon. George Lucas did not view it this way at all. And so I've said the Leslye thing that she gets wrong. I've said the George Lucas thing, but I haven't actually quoted anybody. So may I quote Leslye Headland?
Let's actually, well, we won't put words in anyone's mouth here.
Yes. So Leslye Headland had this to say: honestly, the way I look at it is, there is no light without darkness, no good without bad. So to me, and this might just be a personal thing, the Force is about balance. It's not just a Marvel superpower. The Force sensitive aren't just using telekinesis because they're special, powerful people. It's because they've achieved balance. As Yoda says, my ally is the Force. So the idea of separation from that was really interesting. If you are unbalanced, the Force cannot protect you. Okay, so that's Leslye Headland. Half of that, I don't know what she's talking about. I have no idea.
I was hoping you would. That last part there, especially where
if you are unbalanced, the Force cannot protect you. That very strange.
I kind of take it as, I'll take a stab at it. I think it's like trying to say like a Jedi's access to the full potential of the Force, or to use a Qui-Gon Jinn phrase, the living Force, maybe the bigger picture. Maybe I think maybe that's kind of what she's talking about, because I think an argument could be made, and maybe I'm being overly charitable here, is that dogma narrows the your access to, or the potential of, the Force. And if anything, maybe you could argue the Jedi of the prequel eras were
So that's
dogmatic.
true.
The narrow
That's
dogmatic
true.
view of the Jedi.
Yeah,
That's what
and that's
Palpatine said.
there's truth to that the Jedi had a dogmatic and narrow view of the Force, like Palpatine said. This is something that is reflected very strongly by Qui-Gon Jinn and his tutelage under Count Dooku. It's described in the book Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray.
Great book.
Yeah, the Jedi Order didn't believe that prophecy and seeing in the future in any context was ever possible or ever healthy, and they believed it was always an act of deception. And there's just countless examples that Count Dooku would live out and Qui-Gon Jinn would live out where they did actually see glimpses into the future about how things were going to go, and were able to get interested in prophecy based on that. The Jedi do not believe in that as a principle, because if you foresee the future, you will seek to control it. So they basically are like scared of sensing the future. And that's why Yoda encourages Anakin not to sense the future. Careful you must be when sensing the future, Anakin. So Leslye Headland's view is not abnormal.
No.
Because I just articulated a few minutes ago in describing my book,
in which
I made a very similar case, and I now understand that it's wrong. Sometimes
you got to write another book, man.
Yeah, sometimes you write things that are not correct. But this idea that there is no light without darkness just doesn't really comport with any sort of Western philosophy, which George Lucas might have been drawing on going into thinking about balance and the Force. I really don't like the way that she says, and this might just be a personal thing, but the Force is about balance. Okay. Got it. It's a personal thing. The Force is about balance. The reason that she believes this, though, and that people have always been obsessed with the Grey Jedi for as long as Star Wars has existed, is because people want to have their cake and eat it too. Star Wars fans like to fancy themselves as able to embody the dark, vice, anger, passion, but also discipline and love and all this kind of stuff and compassion. Star Wars fans want to be the middle. I can do both. I know that nobody in Star Wars can do it. I know nobody in Star Wars can survive the dark side. They always get consumed by it and gobbled up by it, and they become darkness itself. But I will be a Grey Jedi, and I will balance it because I can do that. This is the thing that I really hate. I really hate this way of thinking. It's very, very arrogant, and it just kind of cuts against what George believed about balance, which is articulated in a writer's room meeting for the Clone Wars in 2010, where he's talking about what balance is. And he describes balance as being the absence of the dark. The light side is balance, and the
quite
dark
explicitly
side,
by the way, you don't have to roll right past that. He's pretty explicit about it in that clip.
It's very explicit. His view is that the dark side is an imbalancing force, that there is no amount of the dark side that does not cause things to spin out of control. But the light, which is compassion, acceptance, abstention, discipline, like all these kind of things, that is what balance is. And that is completely different from the I want to have my cake and eat it too, and incorporate my darkness and also be a Jedi viewpoint that I think is a reflection of postmodernism and I think progressive secular thought.
I can't disagree with you. I feel like there's almost two arguments to be made here. I'm literally going to do the thing where you both disagree. You've now disagreed with yourself and made eloquent cases for both views of balance in your own book, which I respect you, Stephen, because like instead of being like all of my takes are always right, which is your first sign that you should probably not pay attention to someone's hot takes if they never change. So I appreciate and respect your kind of evolving on this view, because George, I think over the years has kind of described balance in different contexts. In that specific interview in the Clone Wars writing room, I think he is very much focusing on the journey of Anakin Skywalker. And the journey of Anakin Skywalker in the prequels, I think it falls into that more traditional view, the idea of a prophecy where Anakin will bring balance to the Force. I think George was very much writing that specifically as Anakin's story is going to lay the foundation of his redemption in Return of the Jedi, and his redemption in Return of the Jedi when he overthrows Palpatine. That is bringing balance to the Force. And so he kind of retroactively in the prequels, I think, constructs that alternate view. If anything, if we were to like take a philosophical, if we were to pull a thread at a piece of more Western versus Eastern, if we're talking about dualist versus the more traditional view of light and darkness, I think there might be an argument to be made if you look at the more Jungian psychology, the idea of the shadow self. When you're talking about the idea of the Grey Jedi, that's the thing that I'm most reminded of. The shadow self, of course, being that concept of like our sometimes baser instincts or more emotional instincts or animalistic instincts that are the things that both we have to tame, because that is a unique gift we have as humans, is that we can control them and shape them, but we shouldn't silence them, and we should integrate them for good. That's my stab. That's my stab at describing it, Stephen.
Yeah, and I have adhered to the Jungian shadow self idea in a couple different areas of my life at different times, particularly when it was advantageous to me. And I did write again about that in my book, and Star Wars absolutely engages with the Jungian shadow self. It's a blended philosophy,
for sure.
Myth. Like Star Wars is not like an adherent to obviously like Western mythology and lore. It takes everything that has shared ideas and throws them in a blender and spits them out. George Lucas just was an anthropology student. He studied it all. Yeah. And that bit about the shadow self is reflected in people's dark side journeys, where everybody has a shadow self. Everybody has a dark side. That is a fact of Star Wars. It's a fact of life. But it is only with redemption arcs, with Force ghosts, where shadow selves come into play. When it comes to bringing balance to the cosmic force, this is not where the shadow self idea is used in Star Wars. Star Wars uses the shadow self in order to unlock the Force ghosting capability. The people who become Force ghosts in Star Wars are the ones who faced, conquered, and endured some kind of cooperation with their dark side. When Yoda discovers the ability to live on after death through Qui-Gon in the Clone Wars animated series, this is what he learns from the Guardians of the Wills in the spirit realm of the Force, which is that in order to gain this power, you must conquer your hubris. And the trial of conquering one's hubris was fighting his dark side self. But then not just fighting it, looking it in the eye and going like, you and me are equal and the same, meaning you are an equal part of me. You are not an alien. You are not an otherworldly creature. You're actually just as much me as me. That recognition that your darkness is inherently you, that is like the path to being a Force ghost. But that has nothing to do with balancing the Force. That has to do with Star Wars and life after death.
Right. Please do this write up for the next Substack, please. Because I find this fascinating, because it's such an interesting way. If you look at the personal journey of these characters as something where George Lucas, picking the different ingredients for the blender, the Jungian idea, the shadow self, is so evident in the personal journey. It's Luke facing the vision of Vader in the cave only to smash the mask and see himself. It's a brilliant piece of storytelling, which if you haven't, it's season 6. It's the Lost Missions, season 6 of the Clone Wars. You can go. It's some of the best Star Wars animation. Is that episode of Yoda's Journey that kind of explains and fits those pieces of the kind of crisis of faith that Yoda had to go through to be in a position even to have his exile and prepare for the chosen one or I guess maybe not the chosen, the son of the chosen one to arrive and ultimately be the salvation of the galaxy. Yeah, I love that because, and this is the honest view that we have to have, Stephen, which is, we're not here to say that like Star Wars is a Judeo-Christian allegory, nor is it a strictly Eastern Buddhist tradition, because those that lay claim, and there are the books out there that claim Star Wars, but I think the blender is what
Zen
makes it
of
so
Star
great.
Wars, like Buddhism and Star Wars, and also Western, more secular people love to talk about the Eastern influences of Star Wars because they don't want to talk about the Judeo-Christian influences of Star Wars. And so you kind of have like Star Wars fans bring their priors to it and they go, I'm a Christian and I'm very interested in Greco-Roman philosophy. Therefore, what we're going to talk about today is all the ways in which Star Wars is a reflection of that. And then people who are very against Western Civ, all they want to talk about is the Tao and Buddhism in Star Wars, and how George Lucas studied Eastern philosophy. And I'm like, I know he did. He studied everything. He studied everything, and it's in a blender. And as soon as you think that you like are identifying something that George Lucas did for one philosophy or other, he'll be like, well, I kind of drew from this and that.
Yeah,
that's my George Lucas impression.
That's true. Don't you threaten me with a good time. We'll sit here and do George impressions for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, but so I did this video, and it's on Geeky Stoics YouTube channel that I think everybody should check out. I did it quite slapdash. I read this article.
I was impressed, man. You threw this thing together really effectively, really fast.
Yeah, I read this article, and I was like, I have something to say about this that Geeky Stoics has talked a lot about, and it's because I've been on a C.S. Lewis kick lately. So I'm just like, C.S. Lewis. But Leslye Headland says right out of the gate, there is no light without darkness. And I was like, ha, like here's like a philosophical difference. So, that like people who really want darkness and their inner darkness and their passions to be a part of their life, they want to look at it this way. The Christian viewpoint, though, is that darkness, sin, and evil, they only exist because of good things. The Christian worldview is that there are goods and there are natural things, and everything else that is sinful, right? Sin, evil, wickedness, they are corruptions of good things. And that is the only place those things come from. Satan is a fallen angel. He's not just a devil who was, a devil and he was like waiting in hell and like he's the balance to God. No, he's a corrupted and fallen angel, and he takes fallen angels with him to be his lackeys. And then similarly, like sin in the real world is viewed by Christians as corruptions of otherwise good things. And of course, there are different schools of Christian thought, but like that's a kind of a broad Protestant view of this issue. So, right out of the gate, there is no light without darkness. No, I mean, I don't agree with that at all. But what she's saying is understandable. You go like, well, there is no light at the end of the tunnel unless there's a tunnel. And so we understand despair because we know what hope is, and we understand hope because we know what despair is. So I get what she's saying. Like, we understand positivity because we know what negativity is like, but she's trying to make a point about bringing balance to the Force. And her objective is to say that Jedi should be able to use dark side techniques. That's what she wants. She wants Jedi to be able to have romantic relationships. She wants Jedi.
I hope not. I hope you're wrong.
She does. She does. I don't know that for a fact, but she does.
Listen, I'm holding out hope. We were talking about this on Twitter. Like, we are trying so hard. We are hoping. And that's where it is important for us to be honest, like with our own priors. Like, I think we both subscribe more to that traditionalist view of what balance is, which is the defeat of evil. And it's like, that's the ideal state, perhaps is the way to phrase it. But I think that, and I think that fits very much into the prequel. all I can think about is the prequels and Revenge of the Sith, especially, where the corruption, the fall of Anakin Skywalker is born of his naturally good desire to protect those he cares about,
save life,
to save,
protect people.
Yeah, to save Padme from dying. That's how he says it. And that's a good instinct, but then that is corrupted, that is perverted into a selfish desire that becomes not just protective, but the very woman he says he loves. Yeah, exactly. The very woman he says he loves is the one that he's force choking at the end of the film out of his sense of rage and jealousy, thus giving up the very things that he was turning to the dark side for to begin with, which was to save Padme.
Yeah, I mean, this is what is at the heart of Star Wars, and so like I my skin crawls when I kind of hear people wanting to change it willy-nilly, and obviously like Leslye Headland is just giving an interview here.
Sure,
she might just be speaking off the cuff and speaking out of school. I believe in my heart of hearts that nothing happens in Star Wars lore that isn't cleared by some people like higher up. And I again, like Dave Filoni, who's, you know, one of the leadership team in Lucasfilm and story. I happen to believe that nothing would go through without him greenlighting it. That might be naive or foolish, but I do believe it. So it might just be that she's just speaking out of school, and Star Wars is not going to upend at all the dynamic about what a Jedi is or what a Jedi should be. It might just be her opinion. But I just kind of wish like people were making Star Wars who loved what Star Wars is and not wanting to make it something different for themselves, to make their image, their mark on Star Wars. This bothers me.
Which is to say, if I may, I think it's that you respect the blender. It can be a blender, but kind of like keep the same set of ingredients. If you just shove some of the ingredients aside, you begin to lose the recipe. Now I'm really forcing the metaphor here, but
keep going with the kitchen stuff.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. I need to go watch Revenge of the Sith again. It's like, because what is the what's the phrase? It always stuck out to me. Yeah, Palpatine. Like every piece of dialogue with Palpatine always really is perfect, because Ian McDiarmid just nails it every time. But that moment where it's literally the camera's panning as the two characters, Anakin and Palpatine, are opposite each other, literally circling, and he's like, I can feel your anger. It makes you stronger. And I get chills every time, because he knows, hey, it gives you focus. He like spits the word out, focus. It's just it perfectly illustrates that corruption, and it is a purist view of corruption, not a dualist view of corruption. And I think it's one of the real most powerful elements of Revenge of the Sith. So we'll see. As we've said on social media and some of the discussion on the Geeky Stoics handles, I know there's been some replies and a lot of you guys commenting on Steven's video, where it's so easy to fall in that trap of just making broad assumptions about the final product, and we're not there. We have not seen the Acolyte. I want. It's not just that I want to like it in like a general sense. I actually really like. One of the first collaborations we had on the early versions of Geeky Stoics was with some of the Star Wars Celebration interviews, where we were breaking down some of the news that came out at the last Star Wars Celebration. And I remember breaking down the Leslye Headland interview, because she spoke with such reverence and excitement about how the impact that the prequels had on her as a Star Wars fan. And I very much identified with that. So I hold on to that optimism. If you go back and read my piece, I'm like, this is someone who appreciates not just Star Wars, but specifically the prequel storytelling. So I hope that
she did like fan fiction and stuff, and you know, she was like a comic book convention kid, and you know, I love that. The fans from our generation are starting to make Star Wars stories, and it's a very exciting thing. I just I think I've said enough. I've said enough. In Dave Filoni we trust. There should only be one person making Star Wars stories, and it's Dave Filoni. They're always good. And he was George Lucas's student. This is where I get like quasi-religious, because you know, it's like George Lucas was God. And you know, who is his prophet? Who has the authority to speak for him? Who's the Pope? And it's like there's this weird like Reformation element to Star Wars. Who gets to say what is true? Who gets to say what God has decreed? And I'm just like, all right, is it just a democracy where just whoever gets a job on the movie gets to like change the law? Or is it have to be who George Lucas, anointed as the chosen one? And I actually, that's where I'm like very monarchical. I'm like, it has to be an heir.
There's a ceremony, right? Puffs of dark smoke.
Legitimacy matters. Legitimacy matters. No regime can last without legitimate rule.
That's right. Amen. I'm telling you, puffs of smoke in San Francisco, anointing the next leader of Lucasfilm. I approve this message.
What that person says goes.
Well, hey, if you've enjoyed this, we appreciate you. Geeky Stoics has been a passion project now for almost a year, coming up on a year of collaboration. We just crossed, I should have led with this just for some bragging rights or something, but crossed the magical 1,000 subscriber mark here on YouTube. Oh, look at that. Geeky Stoics. Wow, Steven is ready with the graphics. I did not pull this up. This is just Steven right here. But yeah, we are super proud of Geeky Stoics. I'm really excited about some of the content that we're doing. If you haven't, make sure you watch Steven's video on this comparison of philosophy, because it's not just an easy hot take for YouTube clicks and likes. It's some pretty good, solid, thoughtful analysis that drove the discussion of this whole episode. So make sure you like and subscribe and share this video podcast on the YouTube channel. And if audio is your thing, you can also check us out anywhere where you get podcasts. And also, I think as a parting shot, if you're not, make sure you subscribe to the Geeky Stoics Substack, geekystoics.com. It's that easy. That's where you can get our weekly newsletter. It's where we push out each of the videos when we publish them. It's right there. It's that easy. Stephen Kent, tell the good people where they can find you on the internet.
Yeah, I'm easy to reach at Stephen Kent X on Twitter. I am still tweeting, never going to stop. And of course, you can drop into the comments anytime at geekystoics.com. Let us know what you're thinking of the articles, and would love to hear from you.
There it is. Yep, you can find me at the Riley Guy. That's on Instagram and X. Those are the two places primarily you'll find me as well. Until next time, may the force be with you.
Always.